good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 41, is it, of Season 5? This is the final episode of Season 5. Our final session, final episode. We wrap up Season 5 with the end of the Dagor Bragollach here this evening. This is, so we have, once again, we have another full script for this episode, which spoiler, Nick, which I enjoyed very much. And we have a lot to talk about, of course, not only the end of the battle and kind of wrapping up the flow of the battle as we were looking at it last time, and kind of that overall, narrative of where things get left there. At the end of the Dagor Bragollach, but obviously Fingolfin's duel with Morgoth, which is a big deal, a very big deal, and something we've been building towards for quite some time here. So we're gonna jump right into that very soon. But first, two quick announcements. One is I'll do these in reverse order. Our next regional moot is beginning to approach. November 6th, 2021 is Baymouth in Berkeley, California. You can go to signumuniversity.org/events to sign up for that. You can join us in person. I'm going to be heading out there physically to Berkeley for the moot. And of course, you can also join us digitally, as it is, like all of our regional moots, going to be a fully hybrid experience. So looking forward to Baymouth and getting back out to California and meeting up with folks there. Invite you to join us in one way or the other there. Secondly, we've launched our new space program. Our space program, which stands for Signum Portals to Adult Continuing Education, is a program, a continuing education program, which provides lots of different opportunities for really fun learning. Whether you want to be learning languages, continuing to develop languages you've already studied, studying fantasy literature, other humanities, participating in a creative writing workshop, so many things that you can do. And I invite you to check that out at signumuniversity.org/space. And I talked about that last weekend, so last Saturday, in our fall fundraising campaign webathon that we did, ending the campaign last Saturday, which, by the way, thanks very much to everybody who has made donations this year. Of course, it's not too late, even though the campaign is over, but we have had a wonderful fall fundraising campaign. Our annual fund is already over $80,000, which is higher than our whole goal for the entirety of last year. Our goal for this year is $100,000, which is a hitherto unhinted at goal for the Signum annual fund, and we are already quickly approaching it, and less than $10,000 short of our all-time record for annual giving. So it's been a wonderful fundraising season. Thank you so much to everybody whose generosity has contributed towards that. But anyway, if you go to our Signum University YouTube page, you can see the recording of my State of the University address, which I gave on Saturday. And in that, I give full details about our space program, the rationale behind why on earth are we doing it, what is it meant to do, and how does it work. All those questions I answered on Saturday. So I encourage you to go to YouTube and check that out, and just go to our webpage at signumuniversity.org/space. So that is the exciting things currently happening right now at Signum University. And now back to the scene of action here in Northern Beleriand. So I'm gonna need some reminders about exactly where we left things off, so we kind of get some reminders here on this overall map. Right, Nick? We get some recollections here?
Yes. So what we have here is, this is interesting. I don't recognize this portion of the map, but
well, let me go back to the other maps here. So this is which one? Okay, let's see. Which one? Where did we end up? This is the whole flow, right?
Right. So if
Yeah.
you go to map number, so that's the first one, right? That's where we were originally. By the way, you're not on.
Yeah,
Share
I
now.
just realized that too. Okay, there we go. All right. Yep. Okay, sorry. If we go down to, let's see, this one.
This looks right. Yes, this looks
Okay.
like the end of episode 12.
12. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So we had here in the flow of the battle itself, we had essentially 5 different sort of centers of action, right? 5 different
Right.
places where we were focused. One, of course, was Dorthonion, the initial recipient, right, of the wave from Thangorodrim, both of the fire itself, of the initial onslaught of the orcs, and of course of both the Balrogs and the dragon, right? So we had Ladros completely swept away, and refugees running. We had Angrod and Ignor, bravely doing what amounted to a rear guard action there, right, where they were, and having them both killed by Balrogs, while Andreth and the other refugees from the House of Bayor in Ladros were escaping there in the pass of Anok down towards the forest of Brethil. While, of course, we had split them up, right, and we had Barahir and the other warriors of the house who were... what was their initial plan? Like, why did they? What they were keeping? They were going to guard the passes, I know, while the rest of the people escaped.
Yeah. So the initial plan was, like, during the conversation, it shifted from a situation where Barahir was going to stay there in Ladros with all of their warriors and hold back anything that tried to come through. As the refugees fled towards the pass of Anok, and he was convinced by a number of people to instead retreat kind of behind the refugees a little bit more slowly, and Bragollach decided to make a last stand with some of the other older guys.
Right. They were the real rear guard up there in Ladros.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Although they were rear guarding against Glaurung, and I imagine that did not take very long to
right.
to go horribly.
More of a speed bump than a wall. Really. Yeah. Right, but of course we also had one of the sort of subplots there with Barahir and his men in particular was there awaiting Finrod. Like they were anticipating the coming of Finrod from the south, and so they were sort of holding out, waiting for Finrod to come, hoping and expecting that he would come to help and to deliver them, right, or at least to assist in delivering them. Though the whole deliverance thing seemed to go a little bit further and further downstream, right, as things continued there in Dorthonion, going from bad to worse. Okay, and then of course, so Finrod is the second. I'm arbitrarily numbering them right here. Finrod is then the second story. In that we have him hastening up from Nargothrond and eventually arriving at Tol Sirion, though too late, right? Even before he arrives at Tol Sirion, Angrod and Ignor are dead, of which he, receives like telepathic intelligence, right? He can sense their deaths from a distance, and so he's already mourning by the time he arrives in Tol Sirion and talks to Orodreth. And now remind us about his conversation with Orodreth before they leave.
So Orodreth has been observing most of what's been going on in Ardgallen from the top of the Tower of Guard, and he's realized that the orcs have entrenched themselves around the Fens of Serek, which is the same exact thing that they did in the lead up to the Dagor Bragollach.
Right.
And so, what's that?
Dagor Aglareb.
Dagor Aglareb, Dagor Aglareb. Yeah.
Words,
that other battle, the one that went much better. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. The much smaller one, right? And so he tries to convince Finrod, hey, maybe we don't walk into the very same trap that we walked into last time. And Finrod's like, what do you want me to do? I don't have a choice. I have to do something. right?
Right. The
I
alternative
have
is
to
to
try.
do nothing. And
Right.
and his only hope really was that, of course, like, yes, it was the same trap as last time, but last time the entire army of, Morgoth was there, and
Right.
obviously the entire army of Morgoth is busy in lots of other places,
Right.
so maybe
Right.
they're gonna have a chance to break through here.
And he's trying to get to where, because they know that Fingolfin is out on the field of Argallen. He's hoping to be able to meet Fingolfin somewhere out there on the field, on the plain,
Hmm.
which of course does not happen.
Right. Right. Okay, so we last left Finrod. So Finrod marches north and
Mhm.
finds the defenses there in the Fen of Serech, in fact, defended by fairly large quantities of orcs.
Right.
And we left him. We left him under assault, like he was being
We,
attacked by the
we
orcs,
we left him getting ready to go.
getting ready to go. Okay, all
Yeah.
right, okay, all right. So we left him getting ready to go off into a trap against which his nephew Orodreth has already
Right.
warned him.
Right.
Okay.
And they're basically trying to hug the mountains and the hills on the I'll do it on this side because that's the correct side on the camera. On the eastern side
On
of
the
the
eastern
valley,
side.
trying to like punch through in a single point, also to avoid the horns of the earthworks that are there.
Right. Right.
So.
Okay, great. Which, of course, then said he is attempting to break through to go and to reinforce and assist Fingolfin. So we'll go to Fingolfin, number 3, as the third of our 5 different fronts here for this widespread battle. And Fingolfin was initially just watching, right? Watching as, because they could see from Barad Eithel the fire sweeping across Ardgallen, and well, Fingon could,
Yes,
right? And then he was waiting for Fingolfin to come up
Right.
from Mithrim.
Yes.
And of course, so we have the House of Hodor, there we have Fingon and his dudes there, and we have Fingolfin coming up, and they decide to set out to basically see if they can. They're coming to try to help Dorthonion, to see if there's any way that they can help Dorthonion.
They're in the midst of a decision point in that last scene, so they're basically in between Fangordrim and Dorthonion. I've essentially mentally placed Angband like due north of the main area of Dorthonion where Aignor and Angrod were set up.
Right.
Which of course is not on any map that Tolkien
Right.
ever drew, but that's where I have it in my head.
Right. Right.
So
yeah, that's always about where it's been in my head too. Like, imagine it snuggled up against the edge of the arid Wethrin over there. Yeah. So yeah.
So they could turn north and go directly to the source, or they can turn south and see if there's anybody in Dorthonion that they can help in any way. Right. And of course, before they can actually make that decision, suddenly
they
Balrogs
get attacked, right? And that's what we got at the end last time. Gothmog in person leading essentially a big chunk of the army that went south against Dorthonion, which is now done burning Dorthonion down and is turning north under Gothmog to attack Fingolfin. By the way, one of the things that I don't think I said this last time, but I really like the fact that we get a little like moment almost of recapitulation, right? Fingolfin, who is all like, hey, let's go on an offensive and attack Thangorodrim, like, there he is with an army. There's Thangorodrim, basically, looking essentially defenseless, right? And so there's this one moment where, Fingolfin is there like, about that offensive, right? I mean, not that he's that's necessarily the direction that he's going to go, but there's a fun irony, right? That one of the outcomes of this particular is that, at least for a moment, it looks like Thangorodrim is going to be open to an offensive from Fingolfin, and that's kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to create multiple opportunities in these 2 episodes where the audience would be like, "Oh, Fingolfin's going to do something."
Right.
And then he doesn't, and they're disappointed, like, "Aw, he didn't actually go attack Thangorgrim. It would have been cool to see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He didn't
Then we're
actually
gonna make-
fight a Balrog. That would have been really cool.
Right.
So,
Right.
so we're gonna have them thinking that, so that when it does come at the end, they're like, "I take it back. I take it back."
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to see it. Yeah. Can we go back to Fingolfin not actually accomplishing anything yet? Yeah, exactly. No, that's good. I like that. Okay, so he's at that moment where he could turn north to Thangorgrim, he could turn south to, even though, I mean, I would think it's already obvious from a distance, right? That there's no helping Dorthonion at this point.
Right.
And that's when, of course, then we got the assault of the Balrogs and the orcs from the south. And that was really just beginning to intensify, right? The Balrogs were just like coming up and approaching their line when we came to the end of episode 12, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. All right, so then shifting over to the eastern front over there, where we have the Sons of Fëanor. We had the Sons of Fëanor. I've said 5, but really there were 6, because there were 3 different places where the Sons of Fëanor were. Right? We have Amros, who's down in the south, but we had Maedhros, who is on his own in Himring. We had Celegorm and Kurafin, who were with their cavalry in the pass of Aglon. They're right next to Dorthonion. And then we had Maglor and Caranthir cheerfully keeping each other company at the other pass.
The Maglor's Gap, yeah.
Maglor's Gap, yeah, of course, right, yeah, up at Maglor's Gap. Okay,
which doesn't have a name of its own, apparently.
Right, exactly. Okay, so and we have first the eventual routing of the arrogant cavalry of Celegorm and Kurafin, who get basically undone by the first ever assault in mass of the Warg Riders, right? Which is a pretty good anti-cavalry technique, and they barely escape, right, and get away. So they have fortifications there that they retreat to initially.
Yes, which does stop the Warg Riders.
Yeah,
pretty cold, but unfortunately, Dorthonion's completely fallen, and so a bunch of orc infantry just marches around from behind them, and now they've got no protection whatsoever, and their only hope is to just get out.
Right. So they just flee south across Himlad. Their arrogance, perhaps ineffectually humbled, yet nevertheless
not quite yet humbled.
Not yet humbled, but still fleeing.
Humbled is such a strong word for what's going on here.
Especially when applied to, frankly, any son of Fëanor.
Embarrassed would probably be a better word.
There you go.
Yeah, this is Celegorm and Kurafin.
Exactly.
They're not humble under any circumstances.
They are the second least humbled of all of the Sons of Fëanor. Speaking of which, the least humble of the Sons of Fëanor, I think perhaps at this point, is Caranthir, who with Maglor, also they lose Maglor's Gap, and that's where Glaurung comes. Right, yes. Glaurung is the one who breaks through Maglor's Gap. And we have a near conflict, like a near, it's one of those moments where Caranthir and Glaurung almost fight, right, in front of the gate. As I was saying, when you guys ceased to be able to hear me, at the battle at the March of Maedhros, we had, or the Maglor's Gap, we had a near confrontation between Glaurung and Caranthir. Right, yes. In front of the gates.
Yes.
But then Caranthir ran away with uncommon prudence on his part. And the defenses were lost and they retreated. Maglor, of course, said very sensibly, let's go back to him. Let's retreat to Himring, where Maedhros is holding the line. And instead, Caranthir was like, no, I'm going to go back to Lake Helivorn and my keep there. Right.
Yeah.
So we had Caranthir, who is number 4 there on our map, retreating back towards Helivorn, while number 2, Maglor, is heading over to join number 1, Maedhros, who is enduring an assault on Himring, but standing firm. By the way, well, no, we'll get to this in a minute. Okay. And so that's where we were. We had Himring under assault, right, while the other two spots in the east were lost. So we have orcs being able to go in all around, but Himring still standing in the middle, right? And we had Glaurung more or less in pursuit of Caranthir. Did we see that was happening at the end of last time? Or did we not know what was become of Glaurung?
We didn't know what was becoming of Glaurung or Caranthir.
Or
Caranthir was fleeing, and Glaurung was like, that guy.
Okay.
He smells shiny.
Right. But didn't we have didn't we know that Magwar and Caranthir were splitting up?
Yes, that's true.
So that we did know.
And Caranthir did say he was going to keep Hellborn. We just didn't see him.
We didn't see it happen. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. And let's see. Great. And all right, and that's it. So that's where we were with all the things at the end.
When we last left our heroes.
When we left all of our heroes, that's where all of them were. Okay, because I mean this is it's a complicated setup, so I want to make sure that I'm remembering everywhere we got here. The Dagor Bragollach is not a trivial battle to try to coordinate on screen.
To call it a battle is really like, I don't know what possessed Professor Tolkien to use the word battle to describe this, because it's not a battle. It's very clearly a short war.
Right. It's like a campaign on many fronts. Right.
In the tale of years, it lasts a year.
Right. I mean,
spans 2 years.
It starts in 455 and ends in 456. So it takes time.
Right. Exactly. No, I mean, this is enormous. Whereas at least even the, the Near Ninth Arnordiad, which is of a sort of similar scope, is still so much more contained and focused, than the Dagor Bragollach. I don't think.
Essentially, they can see each other. Like even the different fronts can see each other. At least that's been my understanding of how that worked.
Right. At least at one point or other, they got to that point where they were in sight of each other. We're not looking at separate armies advancing to totally different parts of the continent. But it really does. One of the things that's really interesting, and of course I know this comes out in the episode, but just to kind of like, while we're talking about the scope of the battle, the magnitude of this battle is fascinating, right? We had the failed battle, from Morgoth's perspective, right, of the Dagor Aglareb, the failed invasion, which was a much more focused invasion, which seems much more likely to succeed, right? Like to like one single like punch through the lines at one point. And so like that didn't work out. So plan B is we're just going to attack everywhere, everybody everywhere, right? We're going to take on the entire siege all at once. And although this does certainly have the effect of preventing them from coming together and collaborating as they did at the Dagor Aglareb, right? It requires like an order of magnitude more in terms of military strength from Morgoth. And so it makes...
Morgoth has not been idle for the last 400 years.
Right.
He's been building armies.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But the thing that I find really interesting about it is that, of course, like ultimately the criticism, right, is it was still too soon, right? His forces were not strong enough. And so it's a fascinating thing to kind of look at what we've been showing here, right? I mean, the massive military might, which has, been successfully assaulting, so there have been successful assaults on 1, 2, 3, 4 fronts, 5 if you count Fingolfin, right, out on the plain. So 5 out of those 6 assaults that we were looking at have all succeeded, essentially, right? Himmering alone was the only one that was holding out, and that wasn't looking good when we left it there. So again, it's hard to look at this and be like, yeah, it's too bad it wasn't stronger,
Yeah.
But in the end, that's the reality.
It brings to mind the German offensive in Russia during World War II, because it was immensely successful at first and just swept the Russians off the field. It was absurd. They were capturing tens of thousands of soldiers at once. That's why half of their labor camp force was captured Russian POWs.
Right.
And they got hung up at certain points, and unfortunately those were points that Hitler really had a thing for taking. Well, I mean, I say unfortunately, fortunately.
right depending on your point of view. Yeah.
But it's not dissimilar from what's happening here.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go back to so here's our overview of the episode, right? The episode 13. So of course we're picking up immediately where we left off. What was the last scene? The very end was the attack of the Balrogs on Fingolfin, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That was the very end. Okay.
Which is where we pick up in this one also.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've got Fingon and Fingolfin dealing with that counterattack from Gothmog himself and his large army. And then we've got Finrod running into difficulties as predicted by Orodreth. Those are the two things happening in the Western Front. We have Maedhros holding Himmering against Bulldog. So we did make the change that Bulldog was going to be the dude taunting Maedhros.
Swap them out. Basically, Sauron and now... Wow, I can't remember his name.
Gorgal the Butcher.
Gorgal,
yeah.
Are now together at
Fens of Sarek,
which gave us the ability to kind of deal with some of the antagonism that would necessarily arise if Sauron were suddenly thrust into command over an army of orcs that he doesn't really care about.
Right. Yeah, and, I mean, interesting. While his own captains are elsewhere. I mean, Drogluin is there. Out in at Himmering, right? Is where Drogluin is. No, that's right. Okay, and then over in the Eastern Front again, we have Maedhros holding Himmering, and then Glaurung, right, pursuing Caranthir to keep Helivorn, which, of course, as we recall from the text and have set up in many earlier episodes, Caranthir is the wealthiest of the sons of Feanor, has the greatest hoard because of his taxation of the roads, from the and the trade with the dwarves. And so having the dragon make a beeline for Keep Helivorn is I really like that. Okay. So that's sort of our overview, and of course we have our frame. Our frame is the escape. It's the end of the story, so it's the escape of the older brother with Incanus, Gandalf. The beginning of the episode is the final confrontation, right, between the older brother and the younger brother, right? Okay, and then at the end we have the older brother escaping with Gandalf. Right, including a final scene of them arriving at Minas Tirith, something like that.
A single shot, essentially.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Western Front. Let's start with Fingolfin and Fingon. So you did some little
I can talk you through
sketches.
That.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we started here, right?
Yeah. Hang on. Let me pull that up to where I'm. Okay. There we go. All right. Yeah. This is the final scene at the end of the last episode, or at least one of the final scenes. And then the next map shows when Gothmog arrives.
Right. So they're not just standing by themselves. Like there are a bunch of orcs there. And they are Fingolfin looks like they're taking care of business, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like as far as their, like individually in the individual conflicts and tactically one army against the other, Fingolfin has these orcs just exactly where they want them, and it looks like Fingolfin is completely in control, right? With his and our three major elements of his army that we have to keep track of, right, are the heavy infantry of Fingolfin, the heavy cavalry of Fingon, and the light cavalry of the House of Hador, right?
Right.
Okay, so then at the very end we had Gothmog unexpectedly coming in and attacking the heavy cavalry from the flank, right?
Yes.
And so now Fingolfin's infantry is trying to turn, and they've got this other army of orcs that they had been soundly whipping now on their flank as they try to turn around to the south. This red dude way over here on the left-hand side, those are
a detachment of warg riders coming up to stop the human light cavalry from being able to protect Fingolfin on that side. So this is a terrible position for Fingolfin to be in, and if we weren't dealing with Noldor versus orcs, like the Fingolfin's army is toast here. All right.
Right. They've gone from being tactically completely in control to being in an utterly untenable tactical position.
Right. Now, the next scene we're going to see them in is the first scene of episode 13, which is going to be either a few days into their fighting retreat back to Barad Ethel. So here they found a place within the ripples of cooled magma to kind of
defend, basically
set up a defensive position so that they can rest a little bit. At this point, we have Fingon's cavalry split into two different divisions, protecting the flanks, whereas the Dorloman cavalry is working its way along the on the right flank, just trying to skirmish with the orcs to try to help. Basically, they're trying to make sure that Fingolfin's much smaller army does not get outflanked. Here.
Right. And it's important to remember, I want to go back and re-emphasize one of the points that you had just made. It is still true now, as it was in the Dagor Aglareb, that Noldor versus Orc is still really no competition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So an army of Noldor, outnumbered by a large quantity of orcs, are still pretty much in control. That's why I say this because this is why the tactical situation is so important, right? Because they need to be it's not just a matter of like the two armies coming together and, but on this day, the armies of Morgoth proved the stronger. Like the armies of Fingolfin are, person for person, way, way stronger than the armies, except with the significant Balrog exception, right? But
like anytime anytime I had to threaten somebody, I got to throw trolls at them. It's ridiculous.
Right, exactly. The orcs, they can like overwhelm with their numbers, right? But that's their only hope, right? They can't.
Right. Fingolfin's whole thing, like he has to keep the orcs in front of him. As long as he can keep them in front of them, they're fine. Right. It's when anytime they start to get outflanked, that's when they start really running into trouble.
Right.
And in the next map, because this is all in one scene, these four maps here.
Okay. So they start off. So when we return to them, they have retreated somewhat, and they're in a sort of a defensive, vaguely defensible kind of position, right? Yeah. That's so. And I'm just making sure I understand. So the black wavy lines here are meant to be like the lines of magma, the heaps of magma that they're essentially defending here, right?
Right, because this is on Ardgown, which is going to become Enfalglith, but right now is a random lava pool.
Right, exactly. But it's been some time since the lava swept down, so it's hardened and great. So
things start falling apart. I'm just gonna kind of narrate this a little bit because I didn't have time to label anything. So up on the left flank, the cavalry that was protecting the left flank is unable to maintain their position, so they have to pull back. Now, at the beginning of the scene, Fingin sends word to Fingolfin that this has happened, so that Fingolfin is aware that they're not going to be able to hold, that they were about to get outflanked on that side. Fingin is still Fingin and Galdor and Gundor are still protecting the right flank to a certain extent. So they have a certain amount. They have some options here, and Fingolfin is going to use one of those options to give himself a little bit of space, in order to be able to retreat in good order, essentially. Because the important thing was I couldn't have them run all the way back to Barad Ethel, because A, that's not super interesting, and B,
it's really far.
it's a long way. Like
yeah,
you can't sustain a route that long. Like you're gonna get cut to ribbons. So.
Right. And again, this is the thing that orcs are good at, right? Orcs are good at pouncing on people from behind in numbers when they're running away, right? They can't take them on. They can't successfully, with much success, take them on head to head. But this is the constant threat that they're going to just be overrun by the orcs.
Right. So in the next one, so Fingolfin has taken a large amount of his central army and done a small offensive to just knock the orcs back on their heels long enough to start making their retreat, because they're not going to be able to hold this position as the orcs sweep down from the north.
And this again is made easier by the fact that they can almost scatter the orcs when they charge.
Right.
Okay. Right. And you've got the heavy cavalry still. They're the ones on the bottom of the screen there on the right defensive flank, right?
And the cavalry from Dorloman are down here as well. They're a little bit further up, because their whole job is to basically just hammer the outskirts of the enemy to keep them from being able to form up and start making a flanking maneuver.
Okay. And but the rest of the infantry has begun to retreat here.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then
then it becomes this is where it really starts getting messy. So the orcs now are taking the defensive geological formation. Fingolfin is in full retreat, not a rout, but a full retreat before the orcs. Now that small body of heavy cavalry from the left flank is no longer, like, they can't do anything anymore, so they're trying to just get out of the way. But importantly, a cadre of Balrogs and trolls have driven a wedge in between. Have just like,
so that's this one down here at the bottom, right?
Yes.
The right. Okay.
Yeah. So they have attacked Fingon's cavalry and killed a number of them, and in doing so, also they've cut off the cavalry from Dorloman, who were receiving orders to kind of pull back because Fingon could see that they were kind of overextending themselves. But, us humans were a little impetuous. And this is actually kind of going at something, and I think this is going to come out in our conversation about the final discussion between Finrod and Andreth about the way humans think about their own lives, at least at different times during history. So they're kind of putting themselves out there on the line, and they wind up getting cut off in this battle.
Right. Okay. So we lose communication with them, and we don't know what came of them. But it's especially ominous considering that it was like Gothmog and the Balrogs that cut them off from the rest of the, from the rest of the elves. So the action follows Fingon and Fingolfin, right, as they retreat.
Yes.
Okay. And then we don't return to them for a bit, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, this
remind
was
me
all in the very
in the first
season.
scene. Yeah, the first
Yeah.
scene, right. Okay, so remind me of the flow. Actually, no, wait. Let's not do the flow. I'm trying to, because I I really liked the way that the episode flowed. It was one of the things, Nick, that I admired most about the script, was how it balanced the action and simultaneously did not like allow us to forget you know, things happening on the different places, while also having I thought that was a really satisfying like forward momentum of action through the whole thing. So I wanted to kind of go over that.
The chart? Do you want the Gantt chart
Sure.
for the 2 episodes? I'll grab that for you.
Sure. Yeah, we might want to go over that. But anyway, okay. So, but let's finish sort of talking through the Western Front more generally here, and then we can kind of look at the way that all kind of flows together. So the House of Hodor, which had vanished, is going to come back and be heroic at the end. And this is right at the retreat into Barad Ithel, because of course the trickiest part of the retreat is how to get across the narrow causeway and into the building without Gothmog coming right with you up the causeway and through the gates, right?
Yeah.
So you have the heavy infantry, of course, holding down at the bottom, trying to, and so the cavalry gets in. Right. The Fingon's cavalry gets in through the gates. And then we're trying to figure out how to withdraw the infantry.
Right. It's essentially the Battle of Long Island in a way where the Battle of Long Island, which I'm deeply familiar with because that's where I'm from.
That's right.
Where Washington is trying to get his entire army across the Hudson in the middle of a foggy night under the guns of the the British Navy, right, and he's just, you know, like there's a bunch of guys standing out on the shoreline, you know, looking like like the entire army, and they're just whittling them away. All right, you guys now go, and that's essentially what's happening here.
Right. And so Fingolfin and Fingon are there, and now I could see that you were doing a lot of work with Fingon and between Fingon and Fingolfin here, as they are the two of them, and not alone, but the two of them are in the last group of the rear guard they're defending. So tell me a little bit about what you were working to accomplish there with Fingon and Fingolfin.
Right. So what I'm trying to craft is a satisfying conclusion to the plot line between Fingon and Fingolfin that we've been building since episode 2. Right? Since Fingolfin's first conversations with Bayor, where he starts realizing I have to set up Fingon as my heir, right? Yeah. When he starts thinking about his legacy, and that's essentially the conflict between Fingolfin as the important High King, and Fingolfin, the father who has prepared his son to rise and take his place. Right.
Inspired both by the example of the humans, as you said, and also, as we've discussed, some kind of premonition, essentially, of his own imminent death. Right. Yeah. That he has to stop thinking like an elf who's going to functionally be around for as long as his son. There's not a generational thing there necessarily in the normal flow of stuff, but he's realizing that's not the way it's going to be for me. And of course we talked about how that was one of the things that was leading to his initiative for the offensive, right? That he wanted to accomplish something, and believed that, and again, that was back also to the connection with men, that with the vision that he had, that with the help of the Adine, they would be able to accomplish something. Okay, so Fingolfin Fingon is basically just there at the rear guard action again at the gates of Barad Ithel. Fingon is just trying to protect Fingolfin, right? You are the High King. You are, you need to retreat because you're the most important one. And Fingolfin not really thinking that way, right?
Yeah. And what I wanted to do was kind of do two things in one moment, and that's a callback to the moment when Turgon, when Ellenway has died, and Turgon keeps swimming down into ice cold water, trying to find her, and Fingolfin eventually pulls him out of the water personally, and it's the idea of Fingolfin as father, right?
Right.
And to kind of call back to that while also calling forward to the idea of Fingolfin standing between Fingon, of course, but also his people and Morgoth. And that's essentially what winds up happening, where Fingon gets beaten down and Dad is there.
Right. His father's shield protects him. By the way, lovely foreshadowing there, right? As Fingon is almost beaten to a pulp by trolls and Balrogs on the ground, but isn't. Fortunately, isn't it a good thing that Fingon doesn't die that way? So there we go.
I just realized I forgot to pay something off.
Oh yeah?
I wrote something into, I don't know, maybe I didn't write it into that scene where Fingolfin's shield is broken. I intended to have Fingon give him his shield before Fingolfin leaves, or
because Fingolfin did have a shield. You're right. It did have a shield in his battle with Morgoth. Yeah.
Right. I had forgotten about that, but I can always fix that. We can fix it in post.
Right. So Fingon is meant to give him his shield.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. This doesn't mean Fingon is going to be shieldless later on, right? Like presumably he's able to get. He can get a new shield, right? It's right. Okay, but okay, right. So, but then of course, what really saves the day is neither Fingolfin nor Fingon. But all of a sudden, the House of Hador reappears, and they charge in from the flank, attacking even the Balrogs, right? So we have this assault of insane bravery by Galdor and Gundor, who come in and actually wound Gothmog modestly. Was it Gothmog or was it one of the other Balrogs?
Or Balrog number 3.
Okay.
I wanted to keep Balrog. Gothmog loses enough cool points here and there. I figured, let's not chip too far away at that.
And it's true, although we do, we've been keeping pretty well to our Balrog appearance means the death of a named character rule. Yet, there's named characters and then there's named characters, right? I mean, Gothmog is a really big, among the Balrogs, is a very big deal. So it's true that we don't necessarily we want to kind of save Gothmog. Have we had him kill anybody yet, Gothmog?
Gothmog is in the fight with Agnar and Angrod in episode.
Okay, so we have him. Right, so we've had him killing them already, and we're gonna, of course,
this is a bonus killing.
This is a bonus killing, right?
Yeah, the idea here was that, Gundor, he's named, but he's not exactly a big deal kind of character. So we can't let him accomplish very much against the Balrogs other than attack them and die.
Right, which was great. I mean, that was still a wonderful thing to have done, right? And enables them to retreat. He does succeed in saving, the lives at least of many of the Elvish infantry, if not of Fingolfin and Fingon themselves. So I mean, it worked well. And yes, Gundor he's a B-list named character in the sense that we haven't had much development of his character or anything, but still we know him to be one of the sons of Hador, and we know that and it's still a significant deal that the one of the princes of the men of Hador is being slain here. It's a significant sacrifice, not just a desperate attack, but a significant sacrifice by them. So And it worked, he provided, therefore Gondor provided a significant corpse for later on in the episode, so that was good. That was good. I thought that worked. But they managed to get in. When they get in, Gothmog leaves. He's not, he has no remit for Barad Ithel. They're not going to attack.
Right. So they don't attack. They're fresh out of assault, right? Like,
right.
Like, to get this far, they've probably lost untold thousands,
right, of orcs,
right? And so attacking an extremely well placed castle is probably not on the list. There's no timber lying around for them to build siege equipment with. They would have to get all the way up this causeway, getting rained down on and whatnot. So, and he has a victory party to attend back in Angband. So,
right, exactly. So Gothmog and the Balrogs leave, and they leave basically just some orcs there to basically hold them, keep them pinned there, prevent them from just being able to come out again easily and leave.
Right.
Okay. All right. So then we have Finrod. So Finrod decides he's going ahead anyway, right? He's going ahead to the Fens of Serac because he's got to do something. And that, of course, is an interesting kind of subplot here too. Like, why does Finrod go against, Orodreth's advice and do what seems like an unwise thing? And one of the answers to that is because it's his only hope of doing anything, of accomplishing anything. I mean, his choice is between doing a low percentage, not very wise maneuver, or simply sit there and do nothing while the rest of the the lines are destroyed. So,
his alternative is to reinforce Minas Tirith, which is not under attack.
Right.
So,
right. So he goes to the Fens of Serac and is in fact pinned down by the orcs under Saurog and Golog. Was it Golog?
Gorbal.
I know there's another G. Okay, Gorgol. Right.
Yeah.
Gorgol the Butcher from
Gorgol the Butcher.
The Lays. Yeah,
right.
He's from the Lays, right? I think.
Yeah. I think so. I know Bulldog gets mentioned in the Lays. But anyway, there are not all that many named orcs from the Elder Days, so it's good to be able to have a couple to use. Okay. So you did this one too, right?
Yeah.
Nick, did you kind of illustrate here?
Has two maps. This is just to show what's going on there, because I can understand why it might not necessarily be super clear from the script itself. So Finrod's army is essentially acting in a column. They're trying to make their way up along the edge of the hills there. And so they're driving through, right? While at the same time fending off attacks from the left side of the column. So essentially you have this shifting line of battle while also you're fighting into a flank, which is that's insanity. And so it starts off with basically him saying to Orodreth, maybe this was a bad idea.
This really doesn't look like panning out here. Yeah. I mean, trying to march and fight alongside a heavily defended position is not a great idea at all.
No, it's a terrible idea. And Finrod is essentially already considering retreat by the time we open up. But Sauron's got his number, and he sends orcs. Yeah, he sends orcs directly into whatever weak points he can find. He's like, there. Get them, cut them off, bring back any alive you can, because that's really his kind of he would love to capture his entire army en masse. That would be fantastic.
Yes.
And that's what this maneuver sets him up to do. Right.
He's not just trying to grind them down and hey, Dave, Welcome. You're joining the army of Finrod in midst of getting cut to pieces. So
excellent. I was hoping I could ride in like Bara here. And, save the day.
Just about, yeah. Just about. Nearly timed, exactly perfectly there. Now, in the midst of this is where Guilin gets captured, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And by the way, I really liked the fact that basically Sauron is in charge of that, right? That like one of the successful elements that's going to pay off later is a thing that happens under Sauron's watch. All right. And so that setting us up, of course, to sort of suggest that, well, we'll see. We'll see about how we want to. I'm not going to look ahead to the Near Nithor Node yet, because we have too much that's going to happen between now and then. Okay. So things are going now very, very badly. Now, where is Finrod is in the front here? So he's
Finrod's in the van, of what would be the van if they were actually marching in a column.
Right, if they were making progress, it would be the front. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Instead, he's just the right.
Yes, exactly. And so this is then when Bari here and the House of Bayor come down. And are they coming down? Where are they coming down? Are they coming down from the right?
Coming down out of the hills from the right of this image. I do want to give props to Catherine, whose idea essentially the song duel between Finrod and Sauron was.
Goodness. So let's not skip over that.
Yeah.
That was kind of genius, actually. So there were several things that I loved about that. I mean, of course, first of all, if you can have two song duels between Finrod and Sauron, you do it, right? Instead of that's clearly at least twice as good as having only one song duel between. But I mean, obviously, creating the opportunity for the kind of the payoff later on. Really, really fun thing. But the other thing that I really liked about it, you had already talked about how Sauron is obviously, he's like awkwardly and uncomfortably in charge of an army of orcs whom he despises here, right? So showing that Sauron is not simply going to act like Gothmog on the battlefield, right? He's not going to just be like, and now I shall keep smashing them with lots and lots of orcs. He's got a different plan and a more Sauron-like plan and a more effective plan, right? I'm going to, he's going to put himself at a high place looking over the battlefield, and he is going to like smother them magically and spiritually to enable and empower the orcs to overtake them, or rather to overcome their resistance to the orcs.
And that was Catherine's point, and my intention was to do the double envelopment, and my intention was to have Sauron essentially trying to capture their armies whole. Right. And Catherine pointed out, like, but he would do more Sauron-y kind of things, as you say.
Exactly.
And so and also this not only calls forward to their eventual final confrontation, but also calls back to the Merethadarthad.
Right.
The proto song duel between Luthien and Sauron, which Finrod is present for, and Finrod is the one who has been listening this whole time and discovers the instrument that Sauron left behind, the hurdy-gurdy, right?
The hurdy-gurdy, yes, the evil hurdy-gurdy.
Yes.
Yes.
So
of
this
fond
is kind
memory.
of like stretching out its fingers in both directions, and on both ends you find Luthien.
Right. On both ends, you get Luthien first and last, and Finrod and Sauron against each other in some sense or other all the way through. And of course, it doesn't just set up their duel, but again, that dynamic of capturing, right?
Yeah.
In the end, Finrod is going to be in Sauron's stronghold, formerly known as Finrod's stronghold, and the song Duel there is going to be designed to capture Finrod, which he is going to know he was so close to doing right here, right? That he was, you know, this is what he wants to do. So showing how the third song Duel, right, is going to be Sauron, I mean, apparently achieving, right, what he failed to do. And yet we will see his frustration. Okay. All right. I'm cheating and going on. I'm talking about season 6 stuff. But anyway, the point is it sets it up really, really well. And I like that very, very much. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. Tell me about, cause obviously one thing that has to be done with great care here is not stealing the thunder of the song battle between Finrod and Sauron, especially in terms of imagery, because we got close to it, right? Mm-hmm. Let me. I don't. Do you remember where it is? I wanted to look at the series of images. Is it in Act 2 or?
It is in Act 2. It is in Act 2. Scene 6.
Scene 6. Okay. Not sure where to find it, especially since you're flashing all over the place in different places.
I know. It's ridiculous.
There we go. There's Finrod.
Okay, there's Finrod, right? Yeah. So he's just leaving. So we've got
page 17 is where it starts. Yep.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay. So we've got Finrod singing in response. Okay. All right. Here we go. So we do get some imagery, right? We've got mostly it's hope and despair, right? The hope and despair is the primary thing. He is trying to we've got this like fog-like despair, right? You know, is the kind of the visual imagery that you're associating with that. And then you've got the star-filled sky, right? So you've got stars above the fog, right?
Yes.
Evoking, of course, Sam's star in Mordor, right? Which is awesome. Who doesn't like that? And then you've got the trees of Valinor too. So he is opposing despair with hope and with, again, that fundamental insight that Sam is going to have both in the Tower of Cirith Ungol and afterwards, right? About the light versus the darkness, the stars above the shadow. So is the idea here that Finrod basically wins this round?
No, it's because we don't get to a conclusion. As a matter of fact, in the description, like Finrod is really suffering under the oppression here. We don't see that from Sauron, but we're not seeing Sauron at this point in the duel. We're only seeing Finrod. Okay. And
so the scene is we've seen Sauron. I just want to make sure I'm getting this here. So we've seen Sauron like do the Pall of Despair thing, right? Yeah. And then the focus is not so much a one-on-one confrontation thing. It is Finrod standing in the midst of the fog of despair and him attempting to fight that off. And he's having some success, but the success is limited. Is that what we're seeing?
Yes. And essentially what we do is Gandalf and the Witch King at the gates of Minas Tirith, right? Where it's broken by the horn. Now, this is the first time this horn has been heard. And this is why specifically it was after a very, very specific instrument, the Celtic carnix, I think is how you pronounce the word. And it's so scary. It is one of the most terrifying brass type instruments that I'm aware of, and of course an actual horn won't make that sound. But this is the movies, right?
Right, right, yeah, exactly.
And so we've never actually heard the Horn of Brethil sounded, and so when we hear it, like this terrifying horn shatters Fingolfin's song, and so you might be tempted to think, "Oh no, what's happened now?" But instead, a couple thousand angry humans come screaming out of the hills.
Right.
And I really love the idea that their savagery scares the orcs.
Right. Now, here's another call forward that I was thinking we could kind of make here. Obviously, we don't be too mechanical about it, but Barahir doesn't have so many guys that they can actually overwhelm the orcs of Sauron.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So part of what's happening here is kind of misdirect. They think that this is a larger force coming in to, and so the orcs panic, right? Thinking they're about to be overwhelmed. Even though the attacking force, though savage and impressive, is in the minds of the orcs bigger than it actually is.
It really is,
right?
Yeah.
Which, of course, is reminding me ahead of Turin, right?
Yeah.
And that moment when Turin, by himself, right, basically pretends to be a relief column and scares off, an attacking army. When he rescues Dorlas and the others there in Brethil.
Literature and in fact history are replete with this sort of thing happening all the time.
Right. So basically what I mean is, are we going to see any evidence that Barahir is actually attempting to create this kind of illusion? Like that they're trying to create the illusion that there are more of them than there are?
He certainly attacks with a lot of sound and a lot of show. Right. So this is meant to be a sudden assault that sounds very loud and is very obvious. So yes, he's trying to be as big and scary as his army can be in this attack.
And I bet, so if the Horn of Brethil is the thing that is like the really terrifying horn, right? I've got to think that the dude blowing the Horn of Brethil needs to stay off screen, right? Not to be like on the front lines, so that the horn can continue to be blowing as if summoning the next wave and the next wave, right, of the attacker, something like that, right?
Yeah, it's Belegund, and I don't think he actually does come down out of the hills. I think he's back behind Barahir and Baron and whatnot. And also you're hearing answering horn calls along the charge as well. So it's not just him. Everybody who's got a horn is blowing it in answer to his horn, right? So it's again. Stephen Cover brings up Gideon, which is really like it's like the example, right? Like
exactly. Yeah, for sure. No, that's great. So here's what I love about what you guys have done here with this scene. There's a lot that could go wrong with this scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot. So like Finrod could look really weak, right? And he doesn't. Like he's put himself into this really disadvantageous position. And he's done that not just because he's a fool, right? Not just because he's like blindly impetuous or something like that, but because he clearly felt like he had no choice but to try something, and this was their only hope. But yet it doesn't change the fact that he's put his neck in it, right? He has stuck out his neck, and he is in trouble here. So it is his fault, but it's his fault. Like it's like still
what was he supposed to do?
Yeah, it's still kind of like it's still kind of heroic, but still wrong, right? And now he's in a position where he's going to be he's at risk of being destroyed without making him look weak, right? So he's made a strong move and he's done the best that he can, but he's still going to be overtaken. We've preserved Sauron's character. Again, lots that could have gone wrong with the inclusion of Sauron in this battle, one way or another. We haven't compromised the character of Sauron that we've been developing, right? Both with his like relation to orcs and his approach to strategy. And it's really fun to see that the thing that almost leads to his victory and the defeat of Finrod was Sauron's own stratagem, Sauron's own exertion of his own power, doing, as you say, more Sauron-y things than merely sicking the orcs on them. right?
Yeah.
And so I think Sauron comes out of this looking pretty good as well, because in the end, and why does he lose? Why does he not get Finrod in the end? Because the orcs failed him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there he is.
Balrog didn't do his job.
Right.
He told us that they wiped everybody off in Dorthonion off the map.
Right.
Dorthonion was clean. There wasn't supposed to be anybody in there.
Exactly. So there, yeah. So like the other, like Dorthonion was incompletely, defeated, just for starters. And then these useless orcs that he was already rolling his eyes at the beginning of the battle, right? Just like chicken out and fail him. And there's Sauron in the middle going like, I just can't get good help. Right. What am I supposed to do? Here I was practically winning this battle by myself to begin with. Right. And now I am left literally by myself with no others. This is pointless. Let's drop back and start doing intelligent things rather than continuing this stupid offensive. So again, it works. It succeeds both in keeping Sauron in character and not undermining Sauron. And if anything, it kind of strengthens him, right? Like his methods are better. Like, he certainly is going to leave thinking, that is it. I am doing things my way from now on, right?
Which
no more.
Is going to work amazingly.
So much better than this, right? As long as he doesn't run afoul of any elf maidens and talking dogs. But that's all, right? And you have to admit, that's a relatively obscure Achilles heel to have. So,
eventually he's going to have to return to Angband. A humble Sauron, a small and sad Sauron.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, anyone who runs into Luthien, she's kind of the Achilles heel.
Yeah.
Like,
In some way, yes.
Yeah. It's like, Mandus, I don't care about any of you. I will do my own thing. And,
right.
I will not be moved to tears no matter how much you beg and plead. And she's like, but I'm a special case.
Right, unless you're Luthien.
I'll petition a Luthor.
Exactly. Yes. Luthien is just the special case. So, and sorry, that was me making my I am resisting the temptation to leak ahead into season 6 face. So I'm not doing that. Okay. Cause that's not what we're talking about here today. And it's so close. Like can't you smell season 6 from afar right now? Like, oh my goodness. But anyway, we're not going there. Even though I can smell it like the scent of flowers from undying meads wafting across the sea in the distance. So we are going to keep talking. So Sauron comes out really well. And then again, and yet we still also preserve the real heroism of Barahir, right? Yeah. And even the kind of this beautiful reversal. Right. And I say reversal because we had the whole focal point of the end of the story of Barahir in episode 12, right, was about hope, right? Them holding on to hope. And Finrod was their hope. He was the center of the hope that they were holding on to. And then in the end, they end up rescuing him, right? They end up, they become the agents of hope and the agents of the deliverance instead of receiving the deliverance. And that's just a beautiful reversal, right? There's just much that I love about that. So I think that was really, really good. And by the way, can I just also say what a wonderful, notice how we have built on I say you, because this wasn't my idea, how you guys have built on the foundations of what we did, even just down to like the earthworks that were there from the Dagor Bragollach, right? Yeah. Having worked out what, happened at the Dagor Bragollach and exactly how that worked. One like unintended consequence of this is that like here we have this circumstance ready-made and in a way that the visually the viewers should remember, right? Yeah. They will have seen this and those climactic battle moments, back in season 4. Yeah, back in season 4. That still was only one season ago, right? And so they will remember seeing these places. So again, just kind of having that full level of detail already worked out in advance makes this pretty awesome too. So, okay, and then we get the Eastern Front, and the Eastern Front is kind of simpler actually than both of these things. Let's start with Maedhros.
Yeah.
So Maedhros succeeds. Now, make sure I'm understanding properly. The different wards of Himring. So Himring is a star shaped with a keep in the middle, right?
Right. The keep itself is star shaped. Each point of the star has a wall attached to it that goes out to the outer curtain, and so essentially the wards are like the area in between the outer curtain and those walls
and the keep
wall. And
right.
You have to make it through all.
You have to go all the way around the keep in order to get into it.
Right.
Okay.
Unless you can somehow either break down a wall or get like a 90-foot tall ladder up to the very top of it, which
not practical.
No.
Yeah, especially when some significant portion of your attacking army are quadrupeds.
Had they taken this slower, had Sauron been in charge of the assault on Himring, it would not have been an assault. It would have been a prolonged siege. He would have just flung hundreds of thousands of orcs at this thing to build a ramp up the side of the wall out of dirt, like the Romans taking Masada.
Like Masada, right? Yeah, exactly.
And what would you do? Like, that's all she wrote. Eventually, you get in, right? But this is a quick and dirty assault. They're using siege weapons, but it's not optimally effective. And one of the things
I was going to say, the other thing to remember about on the siege weapon front, right, is that these walls were built by people for whom, compared with whom the people who built the walls of Minas Tirith and Orthanc and stuff are hobbyists. Right. I mean, like the impenetrable walls of Minas Tirith and of Orthanc, which are commented, built by the Númenóreans, right? Those were built by the eventual descendants of people who learned everything they knew from these people, right? Yeah. So you're not. Yes, they have catapults throwing rocks, but lest people imagine the ridiculous scenes. And these were although it might not seem like a huge deal, this would make my top 10 least favorite moments in the Lord of the Rings films, actually. When the trebuchets of the attacking armies, they are lobbing these rocks against the walls, which collapse like a Jenga tower, right? Yeah. When the rocks hit them. And that ticked me off so much when I was watching that. First of all, even a normal wall, built by actual medieval people, would not do that, right? It's absolutely absurd. Yes. And much less the walls of Minas Tirith, for crying out loud, right?
It's very, very clear that movie makers have a tenuous grasp at best of what warfare period is much less historical warfare. The worst thing that happens in modern action movies, you have a bunch of people shooting guns at each other and who never run out of bullets and don't
never hit
take cover
and people. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Oh yeah, the sailing ships, Steven, the sailing ships in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just ridiculous. You literally cannot just have two ships sailing alongside each other for several minutes firing cannonballs at each other.
Yes.
They move too fast. The sea is constantly moving.
Right.
Like that can't
Not
be
to
done.
mention the fact that your cannonballs don't blast holes this big around in the wooden hull of the other ship, causing it immediately to sink. Like, that is not how naval... Yeah, agreed, Stephen. That naval combat is done just about as badly as any other kind of warfare in films.
Master and Commander is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Comparatively.
I've heard good things about that one. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things.
I haven't seen it nor read it, but I was under the impression that the books were written by someone who at least knows what naval warfare is.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
So it's probably a good starting point.
Yes.
Right. You better, with more naval experience, you think, than the Pirates of the Caribbean folks? Yeah, possibly so.
I mean, the Pirates of the Caribbean films are pretty cool. Like,
it is. And actually, okay, the one thing I like about the Pirates of the Caribbean film is the way that you have like the one ship that can take out Port City, which is totally true. Like, actually, like the kind of guns that are, you know, the number of cannon on, you know, a fully loaded ship was indeed a threat to a coastal city if it was not heavily defended by properly sited batteries. So that scene, you know, when the pirate ship takes out much of the city was kind of cool. But anyway, back to our totally accurate battle flow here.
The Feanorians know how to build fortresses.
They are not getting through the fortress.
Their first attempt. Like, Himring is in the... It's after they've already built Formenos.
yes.
Formenos was after they'd already built Tyrion upon Tuna, and it's like, at some point, like, they're not beginners.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this is these are the people who are best at this at like the height of their skill. I mean, the Himring is,
And
the only
Mavros
other
has had dwarvish help.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Also,
but, I mean, the only other fortress that would even compare is Gondolin, which is a city, and it's not the same thing.
No.
right.
But
Right.
this is the best fortress the Noldor have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I have to admit, so I had a suspicion at the end of episode 12 that Himring was going to stand. Well, of course, I knew that it did anyway. But even from internally within episode 12, it seemed that Maedhros was going to stand. I have to admit, what I was expecting didn't happen. Like, so what I was expecting was when we were seeing these, like, we kept cutting to these like aerial shots of like ward after ward being filled with, and the orders that he gave to his subordinates, right, about like kind of like drawing them in, and you know, and there was like resistance that was being made and stuff all the way along. But Maedhros seemed clearly to have a plan, right? So I was expecting here's what I was expecting. What I was expecting was that when he got them all like inside the wards, something was going to happen to them. That like there was going to come a moment when Maedhros was like, and now I have them right where I want them, right? And like, boom, he was going to just like crush them all. When everybody else thought that they were losing, right, that Maedhros was going to like bring the hammer down and do something. Now, I liked the like Magor, like the, you know, helping Magor thing. The dwarf tunnels are cool, because but I didn't get quite the payoff I was expecting from Maedhros in that battle.
Yeah, I had in my mind, there was an earlier version of the end of this where he had the dwarves collapse like a big part of the wall onto the orc army, but as I was thinking about it, I was just like, there's just no way that these walls are tall enough to get the kind of coverage you need. And it seems kind of irresponsible to build your castle with
a collapsible wall
to collapse it into it. And so like that was my first thought, like, the idea of him having some kind of sudden inspiration, though, allowed us to have him kind of like show that kind of quick thinking. How do I take advantage of this situation, rather than because my concern was having it appear as if Maedhros was totally fine with everything that was happening and all the people dying preceding that. Right.
Yeah, it's true. We don't want to make him too ruthless, but at the same time, Fëanorian.
Yeah.
He's still a Fëanorian, despite the fact that he's one of the better ones. Yeah.
One thing I was trying to do, though, was make it very clear that he was not spending his soldiers' lives needlessly. Like, he's like, look, when you start getting overrun, you pull back. That's why we have this thing. That's why this is built this way. Don't sit there and die. Like, don't do that. That's a terrible idea, right? And one of the things that because I hate the way depictions of castle warfare are done, because there seems to be this idea that if you sit behind your castle walls, you're a coward.
Right.
It's like, no, if you leave your castle walls, you're a maniac.
Right, or an idiot. Yes, exactly.
Right.
That's what they're for. Yeah.
It's one of the things that really bothered me about what they did with Rohan in Two Towers, where they made it like Gandalf was just so irritated with Theoden for not wanting to ride his tiny little army of riders out and face 10,000 Uruk-hai in the field.
Right.
Like, that just...
you're right. Yeah.
Book was the other way around.
The way that they played Theoden's decision to go to Helm's Deep as like the ridiculous, foolish, terrible decision. Yes. Yeah. No, that was another place where that's in my top 10 too, for sure. It was like, wait, why? Since when is retreating to Helm's Deep a bad idea? That's the whole point of it.
That's why you have a Helm's Deep.
That's right. And then, because even then they're like, oh, we are surrounded. It's like 10,000 to only a few hundred, and it's like, right. And so, wait, show of hands, right? Who thinks it was still a bad idea to retreat to the fortress with odds like that? Like, yeah. And what world does it make sense to do anything else? Right, exactly. So,
the charge out onto the causeway is played as like Aragorn's like, no, here's your chance to ride out and meet them. In the book, like, Aragorn finally breaks down. It's like, okay, fine, we'll go out there. Like,
there's that's the best thing at that point, because it's
He's struggling against Theoden's feyness the entire time.
Right. And at that point in the battle, Theoden's not wrong, right? Like, better to ride forth than to be caught like a badger in a trap, right? Yes, like, his cavalry can do more good on the open field, even against 10,000, than it can, locked into a tower which is being burned down around him. So yeah, absolutely. But that's not step one. So anyway, so I have to admit, though. So go ahead.
We had to give Maedhros a reason to ride out into battle, because otherwise, he's just going to sit in his keep the entire time, and that's not fun to watch.
Right.
So,
Well,
it's
not.
They can do that, but it just, Nick wanted to let the siege progress to a point where it was that, okay, they're going to take the keep unless we do something. So now's the time to.
Now's the time. So okay. I admit, Nick, that I was initially thinking in similar kinds of way, like your wall collapsing kind of thing. Like, I was wanting there to be some master stroke, some trap, right? Something that like he had kind of built into Himring. Because again, the other risk here is that, again, as you said, like, you could make the argument, right, that Himring is quite possibly the strongest fortress ever made by good guys in the history of Middle-earth, or ever to be made by good guys in the history of Middle-earth, right? So, although it's not that I disliked the resolution, right? Like Maglor coming in and the whole, I didn't dislike what happened there. But the thing that I do dislike, see, this is where I was talking with like the Finrod thing about the Finrod Sauron battle thing, how like all of the things to be either to be accomplished or avoided, got accomplished or avoided, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that I feel that we lose here is the strength of Himring, basically.
Right.
Because, like, the fact is, it's like the fortress of Himring had to get its biscuits pulled out of the fire because it almost failed, right? Like, Bulldog, without Glaurung, without Balrogs, right? Bulldog and his orcs, along with some wargs, right? And trolls, like, I know. But anyway, they almost took it, right? They almost took the greatest fortress of all time. And that seems like too much. So but my problem is I don't know what to do either. How to fix it, you know.
I beat my head on that because there's a bunch of moving parts, right? Maglor's got to get there, and his arrival has to mean something. Like what? Otherwise, what's the point? Like, why am I bothering to show this other than the fact that it says it happens in the book, right?
Right.
He has to. It has to get back, like, because he can't just continuously fend. Like, we can't just get 5 scenes of them continuously surviving a siege. It's got to go somewhere, right?
Right. Okay.
And also, it's like there has to be a turn. Like, there has to be some level of threat where we believe on some level that this could go wrong, because like, there are places where it's gone right and places where it's gone wrong. So we're kind of trying the best we can to hide the ball at least a little bit, even though because Balrog's there, we know that he's going to lose.
He's going to lose because he never wins. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
His main job is to be very, very threatening and always lose.
Yes.
Which, of course, is not an unusual position for a TV villain to be in by any stretch. But anyway, okay, so, all right. I agree about all those things.
Yeah.
But what I wanted the turn to be was I'm like, especially since, like, even at the beginning of this episode, not just last episode, but at the beginning of this episode, right? Maedhros standing there and watching as, like, ward after ward is taken. I wanted the turning point to be Maedhros saying, now, right?
Yeah.
And the thing happening. So what I was thinking, and I don't have any brilliant solutions to the problem or anything, but the thing that suggests itself most to me is the way that you've designed Himring, which I really like, the 7-pointed star thing and the different wards, right? Yeah. The obvious what'd you say?
8-pointed star.
Eight pointed star. I say 7-pointed star, right? That's be all Numenorian in that case. Sorry, the 8-pointed star that is Himring. The thing that I was imagining and sort of expecting is that because of the cleverness of the design of it, right? He's made a concentric fortress without it being concentric, right? Because they have to take each of the 8 separate wards individually. But it not only presents, like, 8 separate obstacles, like 8 separate gateways that they've got to beat their way through, but it also puts the invaders in a really awkward position, right? Not only are they in an awkward position because they're subject to, arrow fire from both the outer wall and from the keep, right? Yeah. And the curtain wall. I mean, the dividing walls, and they're now, granted, it's a great number of fish in a pretty large barrel, but they're still fish in a barrel in each individual ward, right? But when they have succeeded in getting all the way to the 8th ward, where they can now begin to contemplate getting into the keep itself, which I am imagining has a much stronger gate than the gates to each individual ward, right? When they get to that point, their army is broken up into 8 chunks all the way around. And so what I was imagining was, like, what if... Because wouldn't it be cool if like the design of Himring, it's like I want Himring to win, like not just Maedhros, I want Himring to win, right? So what if part of the design of it, right? So there are gates, right? And they have to beat their way through the gates, right? So they beat the gates open and now they can just walk right in, right? But what if in addition to the gates, there are the portcullises too, right? He's got these massive portcullises and he drops them all, bam! And now I've divided your army up into 8 chunks, and who are now trapped, right? And separated some of them from their siege, and now we can like kind of take you out. Now, of course, the problem with trapping the assaulting enemy inside, you want them to be able to run away. Like theoretically, you want them to be able to run away.
Yeah.
So there's a disadvantage to doing something like that. It would have and then I'm thinking, okay, but like what else, right? What else would he have? Because I'm thinking again, he's designed this fortress, right? So he's envisioning if the enemy gets inside the walls, they're going to be inside these wards. What are we going to do with them when they are inside these? Yes, we can shoot arrows at them, right? Yeah. Which is good, right? I mean, that's a nice start. But could there be something else? I don't know what. I'm imagining like flooding the ward with something, not necessarily with water, that we could do a little proto Isengard-ish thing there. We could do with like water, fire, something to be like, and now like again, the trap is being sprung.
Actually, that's an interesting idea, because now, of course, this is just in my head. I've never actually done anything with this, but I kind of imagine this being set up almost kind of like a snail shell, right? Because the Himring itself is on this bluff, this headland, right, overlooking the plain, and the gate that goes up to Himring, up to the keep, is in this gap between Himring and another hill. Okay. So it kind of goes up in a spiral to the final ward.
Okay.
So if you were, and that could have been something that could have been the thing that the dwarves were working on, is getting an aquifer to the point where it would get up there and he could release it, and
not to mention the fact,
especially if you had portcullises lowered, now they're just like the water is going through, and these guys are just getting trapped up against it. And the other thing, if we've got uneven terrain, you can do boulders too, because remember, like, this is Himring, right? This is the walls of Himring. The walls of Himring, like, boulders are going to roll down and bounce off it, right? I mean, come on. These are the walls of it. They would do that at Minas Tirith. They do that twice as much at Himring. So again, imagining one of the wards being relatively steep, or at least having one side of it that's relatively steep. Yeah. If again you have, perhaps with the help of the dwarves, you've got a whole bunch of boulders that are being held, by some kind of trapdoor mechanism, and then after you close the portcullis, you release the boulders and it rolls down. They're not a threat to the walls. They'll bounce off the walls. The boulders don't have to be bigger than 6 feet across or something. Yeah. Right. And then they're all rolling down, so they're all crushing the army that's there, right? It's like ripping through them, and then they just like fetch up against the wall and no problem. Now, again, you don't usually want to pile up boulders against your own wall, but this is the wall that's already been taken, right? It's the outer wall that they're fetching up against, and after crushing all the dudes that are there. So we don't have to like annihilate the entire orc army this way. We don't need to like leave Bulldog standing alone outside the gates being like, well, that didn't go well, and then Maglor showing up, with nothing to do. We can still have Maglor's arrival be like the final turning point that breaks everything, right? Of course,
but you want the fortress to fight back. You want the fortress to have part of the way,
and I want
not just the sortie.
Yeah. And I want Maedhros to have had a plan which works, right? And we can see that, like, and I'm okay even if we see that, like, even if Maglor hadn't shown up, he had it under control. Like, that's fine. Like, I think that's fine. I think that it's if Maedhros didn't have a plan, if Himring is not strong enough to stand, and Maedhros did not have a plan, then I think that weakens both of them too much. I'd like that seems to, because again, Himring, it's Himring stands, right? Himring alone stands. Right. And I think that if we're going to have like seriously Himring is on the brink of falling, we would need to bring Glaurung there or Gothmog or something, right? We'd need some kind of exceptional circumstance.
Yeah.
I mean, to be.
Oop.
We lost you.
The Hill of Himring is going to survive the drought.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
But I was just going to say the Hill of Himring survives the drowning of Baleriand.
Right.
So.
Right. Himring stands. Yeah. Himring stands.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's really cool.
Of this entire battle, this was the part that gave me the most trouble, and I was not super satisfied with the end result either. So, having something like that would work. Keeping Maglor's arrival non-trivial, like that could just be that moment's distraction was all that Mythos needed to be able to make this all happen. And again, because the dwarves have been working on this thing for this whole time, having a trap built into Himring seems like a good setup.
So if we did, okay, so here's how we could preserve the orc army's ability to flee and fight Maglor.
There could be a drain.
There's a drain. Yeah. He doesn't have to do all the portcullises at once. He can do one ward at a time. Right. So we can have the moment
watched them out.
right. So the I mean, it is kind of cool to think of like the flood of water, which like goes from ward to ward, like all the way through. But what I was picturing just now is if the, so they're in the final ward, right? And so the underlings are all like, oh no, they're going to break into the keep. And Mythos is like, not today, right? And then he like, hits the button or like, does whatever like needs to be done to like initiate like the, the plan, the thing for which he's been setting them up, this whole time. And so the portcullis closes to the last ward, right? Trapping the foremost, and with all their siege engines and stuff. And then he does whatever, like maybe it's the water, right? So the water comes in, and so like all of the orcs in that first ward are completely gone. Now he's not going to close all the portcullises at once because he does want to, like he knows that if he traps them all, a trapped animal is not safe to approach, right? So like and they don't have enough arrows and enough people to be able to just systematically like shoot to death every arrow, every orc in every ward, right? They do want to let them flee, especially since they could then conceivably destroy them in the field. So, so he closes the first portcullis, wipes out maybe with a flood, right? And then the flood would leak through the portcullis and discommode and certainly disconcert the armies in the next couple wards, right, as they are going to get swept away. And then maybe in the second ward, right, then he puts the portcullis down in the second ward, and then we get the boulders there, right? And we don't even see what happens in the other wards. We can just be at this point now they're running, right? And they're looking back over their shoulders at the gates that they just came through and being like, holy crap, we're dead meat, right? And so they all start running out at this point. And Bulldog is Bulldog doesn't, I don't know if he can see it. I don't know if he can't or whatever. But most of the army is able to escape, right? So like 3/4 of the army that's made it in flees and makes it out, right? And so they're outside there. And now Bulldog, I don't know, Bulldog, it would be like, okay, then I guess a siege, right? At which point Maglor comes and the already spooked army of orcs breaks. And then, Mythos can do the tunnel thing and they can come up and they can, and so then we have the final rout of the orc army there. I mean, it doesn't put Bulldog in a very strong position, but he's the attacker whose dignity we care least about. So that seems to be okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Stephen was pointing out that elves do have a history of defensive floods in Tolkien's works. If we can do a call ahead both to Isengard and to Bruinen, I suppose, with the with the, I mean, yeah, we wouldn't actually need somebody to comment on how vigorous the waters were, but you know.
Well, yeah, your plan was water and boulders, so I was figuring you were thinking through it.
You know, it kind of comes up, right? But also, like, we don't want to do fire because, like, Morgoth just did that one, right? I mean, though it's kind of fun, it would be kind of fun to, you know, kind of turn that back against them in that way. But anyway, but would that kind of save the Magor thing at the end? I mean, it wouldn't be pointless. Like, they will have retreated, right? But they've not been driven out. I mean, they've fled out. Like, they don't want to go back in there anymore, you know?
Yeah.
But Boldag hasn't lost. He still has a really big army, right? And they still did drive them back in there. And so they can be like, well, at least we're safe out here. So let's besiege this place and you know, and then at least we can keep this under control. And you know, maybe even we could have Bulldog say something like, you know, where's that dragon anyway, right? Yeah. Like, let's apply the dragon to this situation when we can. But let's hold on here until the dragon comes, and then Glaurung can settle this. And then Magor shows up and the army gets scattered. So that it still is a siege broken. The assault has already been beaten back, and Bollag has not taken Himring, but the siege gets broken by Magor. So Magor won't be like saving their lives, but it still will be the turning point and the final, you know, the conclusive end of the engagement.
Yeah.
And so that's where I know Nick wanted to preserve the seizing the opportunity that presents itself versus the plan this for 30 years.
Yes.
And so you get both sides of it.
You get both, exactly. Yeah, you've got the plan for 30 years, plus then, his spontaneous sortie. Yeah, because he still would have been in the position, even with them withdrawing outside the front gates, he would still be in a position where it would be foolish for him to just go out and fight them in the plain. Maedhros, having successfully held Himring, would still be in a position of both strength but also of stalemate, basically, where he will need help to prevent him, you know, to lift the siege. So okay, well, that would make me happier. I mean, I know that like that this kind of, though, but I just have to say, like, there's very little that I like more in a battle than like a successful defense of a fortress. Like, I love a good successful defense of a fortress, especially when a fortress is successfully defended, you know, by like planning and cunning and not just by, you know, like in the incompetence of the attackers or something like that. So, you know, this would, and you have to admit that something like this would be sufficiently dramatic to be, you know, interesting and not just the boring side of siege warfare. And we could have Steven suggest an Elven-style big red button for Maedhros to push. Not literally a button, but, you know, again, like that some kind of...
the apparatus is in place so that they can drop those portcullises from within the keep. Clearly.
That's it. Clearly. Exactly.
Is this the Eucatastrophe button?
It's the Eucatastrophe button. Exactly. Maedhros totally has a Eucatastrophe button that he has saved. He's, in fact,
kind of
Maedhros
the
has
purpose of help unlooked for, doesn't it?
Maedhros has a series of 7 Eucatastrophe buttons, you know, that he can hit one after the other. Or 14, or 16. He's got so many Eucatastrophe buttons, right? Oh man, you don't want to.
I kind of think of Maedhros as almost like the Batman of this era, right?
Right.
Like, he just, like, you give him enough time to plan and he can handle anything that you could throw at him.
Yeah. We decided to give him a prosthetic arm, didn't we? Something kind of not like a full prosthetic arm, but not like a mechanical prosthetic arm, but
we decided that he would usually not have anything over his stump because he would want to have evidence of the ordeal he'd been through. But when it came to things like a battle, he would have a shield that he could strap on.
He'd be able to attach it,
so that it would Yeah, so it wouldn't like slide off his arm.
Right, right.
So like he has modified armor and things.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
But
Okay.
not, yeah, he does not have a prosthetic hand.
We,
A
we
prosthetic
should
hand, yeah.
we should probably talk about a dragon.
Yeah,
Not
let's
not
do
that
that.
I
Oh,
don't
wait.
love this conversation, but
The dragon. Yeah, okay. So the dragon. Yeah, lest we rival our last fortnight's newly established record for longest episode ever. Yes, the dragon. So I love, by the way, I thought, Nick, because we talked about this last time about Glaurung speaking and stuff. I thought you really came through with Glaurung's first dialogue. I thought that his speech was awesome.
good.
I really love the way that went. Do you know where that is? Can I find
It's
that?
not too far. It's not too far away. Oh, by the way, this speech from Maedhros, to give you the once again, a little bit of stealing happened there. This is from de Gaulle's speech, Charles de Gaulle's speech after the surrender of France to the Nazis.
Right. So Himmering stands alone. That part of the
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
The
Okay,
whole
so
fury and might, that bit there. That's
Yes. Okay. Right. So here's Amroth shows up and finds Caranthir running out with jewels. Okay. So here Glaurung's first word is thief. Right. Repeating it back. So we get the echo back.
Yeah.
And I love that. The way in which it doesn't just establish the parallel, but the reversal of Glaurung and Caranthir. Right. But showing how how alike Caranthir is to Glaurung and stuff. That's really, really cool. But then, yes, his first full speech here, right? Yes, thief, highwayman, robber of travelers. Long have you stolen from your neighbors, and now in defeat you would steal from your conqueror. And then he commands him to come, right? So cool. I thought you were echoing Glaurung's style. There were clear syntactic echoes of his final speech to Turin, his dying speech to Turin, his speeches to Turin inside Nargothrond and stuff. So it sounded like Glaurung. I mean, it definitely had the stylistic feel, and not only that, but the sort of approach, right? That I'm going to characterize what you do in a way which is malicious and warped, but also not wrong at all. Right? And that's that element, I thought of it worked really well. The power of his will in issuing that command, where Caranthir is actually shaken and at risk of coming under the dragon spell at the end, I thought was a good foretaste again. So, and this, just all the stuff that we talked about before about how we want to make sure we don't want to give too much away, but we do want to make sure that we're prepared for what we see later with Glaurung. Yeah. I thought that it
also
it did
this
a really
allows
great
us to
job.
not be too hard on Turin and Nienor for what happens, because let's be real, they could not have resisted.
There is no chance. Yeah. There is yes, they are pitted against a foe who is far too great for them. There are no two ways about that. So I think that's really we've revealed that this is in Glaurung's arsenal, and we've done so at a moment which is not a climactic moment. the taking of Keep Hellvorn is not the world's biggest deal. But a good deal is accomplished here, right? It is revealed at this moment, so we're not going to be shocked and confused to see him acting and doing this kind of thing later on. What's more, we've connected it thematically with what we're also revealing about his character, the whole dragon thing and dragon sickness thing, which it's not it's not like dragons being on hordes of wealth is a new thing that is going to shock and surprise the viewers, but nevertheless we've not associated that with Glaurung yet. He's been nothing but a roving siege weapon so far, basically.
This is the very first occurrence of this trope, right? In our world, anyway.
Exactly. And showing his like personality as well. Like we see, this is the first time we see any hint of like what Glaurung himself cares about. Because this, as far as we can see, and that's of course the other thing that I love. Like I love the way in which Caranthir and Glaurung are paralleled throughout this whole thing, right? Caranthir is a waste of time and a waste of space, right? While meanwhile his brothers are all doing all this stuff over here, he's just running to like save his own wealth, right? It's ridiculous and it's counterproductive. But guess what? So is Glaurung, right? Glaurung has left the serious battle. Nobody was like, oh well, but if only we can keep Hellevorn, then the battle will be won. Nobody cares about Keep Hellevorn. It's in the middle of no. I mean, eventually they'll want to take it, but you know. If Glaurung had been at, say, Himring, maybe things would have been different, right? But instead, Glaurung's indulging himself, just like Caranthir is indulging himself, right? And I like that. I love that, you know. And again, when we're learning more about Glaurung, like what is motivating him? What does he want? What does he get out of things? And it is, you know, it's not shocking. It fits I mean, it's satisfying to, you know, you don't always want to resist every trope, right? You know, some tropes are satisfying to see fulfilled. And now, I mean, and it's especially when we've got the Father of Dragons, right? So this ability to see like, look, the first dragon gets his first horde, right? Yes. I mean, it's like an origin story almost, right? To see this, and that's so cool. So anyway, I love that. Amras's role in this whole thing is it falls short of being comical, which is good, but it skirts the edges of comedy, almost with like you know, Caranthir being, especially since the one of the senses that the whole Glaurung, Caranthir, Amras scene gave was kind of the sense of there being like nobody else around, of it being like just the two of them, and which is, I guess, kind of true. Like Caranthir's men have all run away, and Amras's have like not approached because so it kind of is Amras by himself and Caranthir by himself, but it is a slightly odd kind of like privacy, you know, over this thing, which is, that felt a little bit weird to me, but I didn't think it necessarily needed corrected. But I think that was the element that was making me feel like there was something almost comical about this, because, you know, we're kind of the way that they're being ice. I don't know. I guess it's not that I disliked it. It was just one of the things that I noticed.
Moment. Is that what you? Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Especially and with the you know, the dropping of the treasure chest and him. Like Caranthir gets a little bit. When he comes out with the treasure, right?
Yeah.
And being like, okay, you're gonna help me do that. Like, that seems like such a come down from him. I mean, he's like arrogant and crude and awful in lots of ways. But the like sneaking out with a chest of jewels under his arm seems like a very serious come down for his character, before even the confrontation with Glaurung happens.
Right. Well, first thing, it doesn't even occur to him that Amras wouldn't be interested in helping save all this gold.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that what I was actually kind of aiming for was for Caranthir to look kind of like a little bit like the master of Lake Town, you know, trying to flee with the money, right?
Yeah, with the whole dragon sickness thing, right? So
is what I was aiming for. Like, in the face of like this guy that's been a blowhard this whole time, and the reality is that Caranthir cannot take on Glaurung,
right?
Like, he can't, right? And to use Glaurung to kind of give him a little bit of a comeuppance, where he doesn't even get a moment of dignity. Right. That's I really wanted to make sure that he did not come away from this with a shred of dignity left, and the audience should not really be taking him seriously ever again after this. As it, you know, like, if they ever in fact did.
We agreed from the beginning that of all the sons of Feanor, Caranthir was the one who was not going to get any character development over the entire course of the film project.
Right.
So he was going to start out being a very arrogant jerk, and he was going to end a very arrogant jerk, and no character growth would ever happen for him. So from that point of view, we have consistently written him as comic relief.
Right.
He's over the top in every scene he's in. He makes decisions that make no sense, and he just has to be kind of managed by the characters around him.
Right.
So this is him without characters around him to manage him until Emrosh shows up. So it's just meant to be he is kind of a pathetic character.
Right.
His only redeeming moment, which isn't even all that redeeming, is his interaction with Haleth, which is now in the past. So from here on out, all he's going to do is get involved in kinslings and get killed.
Right. And he is also competent in battle. I mean, he's a great warrior.
Yeah. Which comes in episode 12. You see that. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And that was established there. Though as was his utter inability to stand up to Glaurung, obviously. But of course, I mean, but that's kind of a lovely thing, right? Is that like the consistency of his jerkitude all the way through is going to make his prowess in battle be a bad thing by the end, right? Because he's going to be applying it in additional kinslayings, right? As we move on towards the end. So that will be no redeeming feature as we move down. Okay, I guess he's going to be involved in the Near Ninth as well. I'm trying to think, like, is Caranthir ever going to do anything constructive ever again?
But what he does in the Near Ninth is not what I would call constructive.
Right. His role in the Near Ninth is to invite the people who are going to betray them to be their allies. Yeah. So he lets himself get sweet-talked by traitors.
And that will be the comparative high water mark of the rest of his career. Because after that, it's... nothing but skinslayings until the end, right? Pretty much. So, okay. Yep. So yeah, anyway, it's like, I thought, but I did, Nick, want to give you kudos for the changes that you made. I know we, talked about, this is one of the things that we kind of spontaneously changed the plan for in our discussions last time. And I thought that it worked really, really well. I loved this. That's why I want to go back and read that speech in particular, because, and I love that your stage cue, more conversational, was itself a lovely reference, setting up, the anticipation not only of Glaurung's own conversations with Turin, both of his conversations with Turin, but obviously the conversation with Smaug as well. So I thought that was, and especially like, yes, thief, well, thief, of course, is how Smaug begins his conversation. So anyway, that's, that was lovely. I thought that went really, really well. Cool. So we've got the aftermath, and then we've got, gosh, we better hurry. Okay, no problem, because this is the last episode. So we've got Finrod giving the ring to Barahir, and I love how the big deal that Finrod made of that, about how, the thing that I thought was really coolest about that is how Finrod points out, like, this ring is an heirloom before you get it, right? Like this ring, which is most famous for being an heirloom for thousands of years after that, is already an heirloom, right? When Barahir gets it. So that sense of that this ring is a connection back to something greater, and in this case, back to Tyrion itself, right? This is a direct link to Valinor, and of course, this didn't get played up exactly in the dialogue, but I can't help, and I don't know that you would want to do this explicitly, but this is Barahir. This is the heir of Bayor, right? They who were seeking the light in the west, right, with the song that they sang and stuff, and that he receives, this ring, which is itself a memory of the light in the west, from, that, when the trees were, they haven't found the light in the west, but this thing becomes almost like a symbol of the fulfillment of their quest, right? There could be a real closing of the loop, of the, and it's totally unanticipated, right? Like, here we are, the last remnant in defeat, as the shadows that you thought you were escaping seems to be rolling over us. And yet you have it, through your actions, by combining together, right? This alliance between the Edain and the Eldar, there is a callback to the light in the west there. Like, there is some kind of achievement there. I don't know. Like, I don't know exactly. I can't think of a really skillful way to bring that together, but I thought that there was some real, that was the thing that I was thinking when you were emphasizing the heirloomness and connection to Valinor.
So he could say something to the effect of, I give this to you in addition to in supporting his vow and whatnot, in memory of ancient light and old hope.
Yeah.
And they kind of exchange a knowing look over that, because Barra here, I want to believe knows about the old hope and perhaps even believes in it.
Right. And of course we can do it with the music as well.
Yeah.
Right. Like the music that's playing in the background is a reprise of the Light in the West song. Right.
Yeah.
It's not the full choral version. Right. And no one's going to bust out singing the Light of the West at this point. But if the score at that moment is doing a reprise. Yeah. Like, if that's what's happening while we're getting the glimpse of the Tyrion and stuff, then that I think would do the work of closing that together, which would be a pretty good way to close out the House of Bayor. Except, wait, we still have Andreth to close out the House of Bayor as well. But she's not. It's Bara here who really is kind of standing in for the House of Bayor here. Andreth is kind of doing her own thing in some ways. Right.
She's resolving change.
Yes.
Barra here can resolve hope, and Andreth can resolve change.
Yep. Okay. Yep. All right. So.
The conversation of the Noldor and the House of Hodor at Barad Ethel, to put on my cinematographer hat, I kind of envisioned that as these conversations, they're going back and forth between different individuals, all right? And so the camera's kind of circling around, but Fingolfin is always at the center or near the center of the frame as they go around, even though he's not speaking. And I would love to engineer that in such a way that it wasn't obvious that was what was happening. That you could always see him no matter who was speaking.
Right.
Would be really important.
He's laying the foundation for his decision and what he's planning to do. But we don't get it yet. We don't get it stated or anything.
Right.
The Maedhros and Sauron, I loved that scene.
Yeah.
That was so good. So good. So for folks who haven't read it, it's this synopsis of the battle, right? As they're sort of looking back over the battle. And on the one hand, there is the statement from like the Elvish side of like what a disaster it's been. And Sauron is assessing it from the bad guy's side and saying what a disappointing what a disappointing lack of what a disappointing failure it's been from Morgoth's perspective, and the way that kind of dovetails into each other as they're talking about the same things, and we keep flashing back and forth from one side to another. I thought that worked really, really well, and I was it was a very cool way to kind of frame, because of course we've established, I think, successfully established, this battle went really badly, and this was an almost complete disaster for the good guys. I don't think anybody's going to emerge from what we've shown in the last two episodes not thinking that, right? And yet we need to show the war is very far from over, right? There's a lot of ground that still needs to be covered, because there would be a risk, right? There would be a risk if we left people with basically like nothing but the scorched, smoking earth of northern Beleriand, right at the end of season 5, credits roll, and then at the beginning of season 6, we're like, meanwhile, in peaceful Doriath and everywhere else, then let people be like, wait a second, I thought that Morgoth won. Like, are we just taking that back now, right? Yeah. I mean, so showing that yes, much was accomplished and yes, much was destroyed. But, it's not anything like as complete a victory for Morgoth as it seemed like it might be or might have been. And to have Sauron being the voice of that, being like, you know what, at the end of the day, this whole thing was bungled really badly, right? Yeah. It seems a totally fair assessment from Sauron's standpoint, and a perfect thing for Sauron himself to be saying, to set up, what's going to be happening with Morgoth after.
Yeah. This was originally supposed to be 2 different scenes. And then a slight mix-up in when we were outlining caused me to take another look at the structure of the latter half of the episode. And I said, well, wait a minute, I could just make this one. Why am I making this 2 scenes? It doesn't make any sense, because they're having the same conversation. It should have occurred to us earlier that they're actually talking against each other.
Yes.
And so having them almost appear to be speaking in answer to each other.
Yeah, exactly. So just to read a little tiny bit of it, just to just kind of illustrate how well that works. Maedhros is saying, but even if our Western allies survive, the siege is broken. Orcs travel freely through Dorthonion and through East Beleriand. Amra sends word that the dragon has taken Caranthir's keep. Sauron, where he now sits, of no value to our endeavor, having forsaken the mission with which he was entrusted. Even so, surely the Noldor will not soon recover from this defeat, giving us a stepping stone to their downfall. Assuredly, but the ground they have lost, Magwar says, can be regained. Many of our people survive. Yes, but as I say, the siege has been broken. I mean, because it's not just the 2 of them, right? It's not just Sauron and it's like... Yeah. The 2 of them are like, Maedhros is stating that, the negative side from his point of view, and Sauron the negative side from his point of view, and both of them have somebody who's contradicting them and giving the bright side from their points of view, which are also dovetailing with each other. It was so elegantly done. I just loved this.
Thank you.
It was, and again, this is really essential. Like, this scene I felt was like in a kind of, unexpected and kind of an unanticipated way, a hugely important setup. Like, this is like what is going to set up the whole situation. This scene is what sets up the whole situation in season 5. And I say unexpected because it's not at the end, right? It's not, like this comes so early, it's like halfway through the episode, or a little bit more than halfway through. So, maybe 2/3 of the way through the episode. There's a whole lot to come, and we won't forget about this, but that's why I wasn't expecting like the sum up scene, at that point. That kind of breakdown.
This was important for the breath before the plunge feel, right?
Right.
Again, I wanted to have the 3rd act feel very much like we're wrapping something up, but we're also leading up to something at the same time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just managing the tension of the episode in that 3rd act lull there.
Yeah, definitely. That is that's really great. So yeah, I that was one of my favorite scenes in the whole episode, actually. Now, Finrod and Andreth, tell me about the things that we're sort of needing to accomplish that, because we had already the sort of farewell between Finrod and Andreth before, right, which was a very moving scene, and the culmination of the Athrobeth, and we kind of like spill back into Athrobeth land, right? Here, with Andreth's bitterness, though she apologizes for it, right? But we kind of find ourselves back there again. So tell me what you were kind of working on there. That was obviously a difficult scene.
Right. So there are two main things. Finrod's got to get to the place where Fingolfin was back in episode 2. He's got to get to that point. He's got to catch up with Fingolfin. Also, having this conversation here leads directly into part of Fingolfin's motivation for what's about to come. Right. It explains a key difference. And this is something that I was mentioning earlier, a key difference from when elves are willing to risk their lives and when humans are willing to risk their lives. Because humans, our lives are so short. Like, I had an epiphany about this while standing on a ladder 30 feet in the air, taking a camera down and having 5 really angry spiders boil out of it. It was hilarious. But the things that we are willing to take risks for, even to just support and sustain our progeny and our legacy, right? Because we are historically willing to risk our lives quite haphazardly for the mere chance at something better for those who are coming after us. Whereas elves can kind of afford to kind of step back and say, okay, do I really need to do this? And yes, if an elf dies, they're eventually gonna come back, but it's not the same, and they're going to be a lot more careful and cautious as they're considering what the impact of their actions are going to be, and is it really worth me throwing my life away, my eternal existence away? Right. And so illustrating that and the focus of humans on what's coming after they cease to exist as being more important than their own existence is one of the key elements that was coming out of Andreth's half of that conversation. But also to give Andreth closure, she learns the surety of Ignor's death, which she is suspected. She's not an idiot. She knows the geography of the land. She knows that there's no way that he could have survived. But to have that confirmation from Finrod, she is able to deal with the loss that she suffered decades ago at this point. And now it's over. So. Yeah.
And of course we worked in the gifting of Narsil here. Right.
Yeah. Which I almost forgot about. I seen and realized, oh wait, Narsil. Oh my goodness. So I had to put Emelindir back up into the scene and move some stuff around, and I was able to utilize Gandalf's line about the time that is given, and work that into that spot.
Yeah. No, I like that. Having her ending up with the sword with Narsil was, it gives her, it points at least symbolically to like her relationship to posterity, right?
Yeah.
There are 2 things in this episode that are going to be handed down and still going to be, in circulation, right? In Aragorn's possession, at in the Lord of the Rings. And so one of them is transmitted through Andreth, right? And so having her kind of using that as a way to kind of connect her experience, her role in this whole season, right? And kind of connecting that through, using that to kind of look ahead through and think about her own legacy, right? And the way in which the wisdom of Andreth and her own role is going to be also handed down as we move forward. Yeah. And Brian, you're certainly right. There are a lot of plates to keep spinning as we go through here, and all of the stuff that we're wanting to set up for later. Between the things that we're resolving now, the things that we don't want to forget that we wanted to pay off from earlier on, and the things that we're trying to set up to pay off in 15 years, it's a lot to keep straight, for sure. Okay, well, let's talk about Fingolfin and Morgoth.
Little thing. Just a little thing left.
Little thing, yeah.
What'd you think?
I loved it. I loved it. I was, I thought it was a brilliant idea. Like the way that so the scene as it's described in the book is really short, right?
Yeah.
That's like one of the only things that I've always disliked about that. It's one of the most inspiring moments of the Silmarillion, and it's in a paragraph, right? It's like just a handful of sentences, the entire thing. So, but obviously it's not like we can expand it over 4, episodes or something like that. So, but like where it was going to be expanded and how, your choice of the 7 wounds, right, as the place to draw it out, basically, right? I thought was both very natural and very effective, right? I think about ways in which a one-on-one combat like this would be drawn out and made more epic in like a Marvel film or something, right? In a Marvel film, they would do it by destroying a large percentage of the landscape.
Yes.
Right.
Which is kind of happening.
Which is kind of happening with the craters. Yeah. But anyway, there are lots of ways in which it could be done. But the way that you not only chose to really emphasize each individual wound that he manages to give to Morgoth, but also connecting that back to, the wrongs that he's done to them, was really cool. I have to admit, the breaking of Ringil I did not see coming. That was the thing I was surprised by when we got there. The re-breaking of Ringil. I thought it was. I was pretty sure that I thought that it worked. I wasn't 100% confident. I kind of like my first input. It's some. I've only read it once, so like I'd need to like reread it and think about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But on my first reading, I thought it worked. Especially because you were having visually recalling when he snapped it on purpose. And that was the parallel. Like I thought that parallel between his snapping it on purpose and Morgoth snapping it was the like most high risk element of it, and the part that I was not 100% sure worked, because the risk there, it seems to me, is that it risks undermining his last moment. Right? He breaks his sword originally because of the kinslaying, right? It's an act almost of atonement, right? For the kinslaying. And on the one hand, like the thing that I was thinking that made it work was that the breaking of his sword, which has been associated with the kinslaying itself, right? Also explains why Fingolfin has no chance of winning, right? Because he's still under the curse of Mandos, right? Yeah. Like, it's not gonna work out well. This is not gonna end well for him. And the kinslaying is at the back of part, at least, of why. The other reason why it's not gonna work out well for him is that this is still Melkor we're talking about, right? Yeah. He still is great, even though much lesser. So that element, but at the same time, the risk that I felt that the parallel was taking was that it risks undoing or appearing to undo the progress he's made since that point, right? I mean, like a lot has gone on with Fingolfin since the time when he broke his sword, right?
Yeah.
That was like a good step for him, right? In a sense of like the, you know, his repentance, right, for the kinslaying, and a moment in which we see Fingolfin and Feanor's paths branching clearly, right? And so I thought it was really effective for that back then in the day. And then of course we see that continuing as, you know, the contrast between the burning of the ships and the crossing of the Hel Caraxa, right? Which is the, you know, sort of the two complementary things, like Feanor's choice and Fingolfin's choice, right? The choice of self-sacrifice and courage versus the choice of, you know, selfishness and betrayal. And anyway, like, there's lots of ways in which that works. And again, the breaking of that sword was kind of like the signal of that. But Ringo gets reforged, right? And it's kind of, it becomes therefore sort of part of his new life as a, you know, doing the best he can as a constructive, positive leader, though again, still under the curse of Mando. So it's again, as I say, that's why I wasn't reading it being like, no, I don't like it. It kind of went both ways for me.
So there's a few things that's designed to do. One is a purely visual thing, and that's to demonstrate that there's something significant about that sword blade, because when it breaks, there's this flash of light, right, that kind of disrupts Morgoth's what he's doing. Another thing that's happening is we are calling forward to the defeat of Sauron in the Battle of the Last Alliance and all that,
right?
Which is nice, but it's not critical, right? But one thing that I thought was kind of important is because Morgoth makes this thing about how he's going to send Fingolfin to meet with Feanor, right?
Right.
And I wanted to have this serve kind of as a reminder of the fact that Fingolfin has committed a lot of the same sins as Feanor, right? His hubris and his pride has played a tremendous role in bringing him here, right? And it also says to Fingolfin, you made this change in your life, but you still can't beat me, right? And of course, Fingolfin's response to that is, I don't need to beat you. Like, my role in this story is complete. I've done everything I need to do. And there's that peace in his demeanor as he realizes and accepts that, right? Over the course of the fight, there was this transition from the rage of his approach to the kind of like, oh, I stuck my foot right in this, didn't I? To kind of this is going unexpectedly well, to the acceptance of the mythic moment. Right.
Yeah, and the success of his stab with the shards of the sword, right? So if you're establishing, if we're wanting to recall the kinslaying, as you said, like, you know, Fingolfin was a part of that, and there are parallels there with Feanor. But he's also not Feanor, right? I mean, he does, despite the broken sword, strike back at him. So,
like, I'm broken. I'm not perfect.
Right.
But I can still do.
And I'm still under the curse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I can still accomplish my tasks.
Yeah.
Everybody's about had it. I could see it.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So I thought that the onlookers were really effective.
That's Brian, by the way. That's all Brian. Also, the bringing up of the "you did this to me," like that's all Brian. I had written out, and of course, in a real script, a lot of those paragraphs of fight scene would just be they fight some more, right?
Brian wrote the fight scenes.
No. I'm just saying that what I wrote was far beyond what you would normally see in a script as far as the detail of the fight.
The details of the fight, yeah.
Because you would ask for the 7 wounds to be significant, so I wanted to make sure I gave all of that, and I did a blow by blow that a scriptwriter typically wouldn't do.
Right.
And so there was just all that and relatively little dialogue. I think the line from Morgoth at the end and the most of the first line from Fingolfin at the beginning of the fight were there, and there was just they fought in silence in between. But the additional accusations, that's from Brian and from Marie as well. So
I loved that. I mean, and even, and so Marie, the part of this whole scene that made me tear up, the part of the scene that made me tear up was the for Feanor part. That was so beautiful as the culmination of, I mean, just the way that it makes you think back to Fingolfin and Feanor's long and very complicated relationship. But, that at the end, one of the things Fingolfin would be fighting for is, against Morgoth for what he did to Feanor, right? That was the most beautiful of all of them. I thought that really, that was the place where I started to cry when I was reading it. That was very, very effective. The other thing that was a little bit risky, and this is my last point. The last point that was a little bit risky was the sort of like quasi telepathic thing that's happening also with all the other like elf persons. We got Turgon, and now on the one hand, what I loved about it was that this scene, right, that the fight between Fingolfin and Morgoth is like resounding through the continent, seemed exactly right, even though there was a part of me which was like, what are the mechanics of this exactly? Like, how exactly? I mean, it's one that I was able to buy with no problem Finrod like being aware of the deaths of his brothers, partly because it's Finrod and he's got the whole telepathic thing. But, anyway, like that, that didn't strain my disbelief. But I'm like, wait, how are they knowing what's going on here?
Morgoth.
Yeah, the connection here is Lamoth, where Morgoth, of course, cried out when Ungoliant was hurting him, and how that echoes forever in that place. So the idea is here is if Morgoth is crying out in pain, you don't necessarily have to be right there to hear that.
Right.
That's Morgoth is projecting this out to the whole world.
Right.
So they're not actually observing what's happening. They're not aware of what's happening. We may be kind of hinting that through our cinematography and whatnot, but they aren't actually aware of what's happening. But they do know that something big is happening. And so, for example, Maedhros has a definite sensation that, Fingolfin went ahead and did it anyway. And
he at least has reason to think that. Now, like Turgon has no reason to have any idea what's going on.
He's just looking out like, what is going on out there, right? But Maedhros, and what I wanted to get was this idea that Maedhros, on one hand, but still believes that everything he did was the correct thing to do, while still wishing he could have been there alongside Fingolfin. Right.
Yes.
Because maybe if the two of them were there, or maybe if 3 or 4 more of the elf lords were there, maybe that looks different. Of course, if that happens, Morgoth never comes out, right?
Right. Exactly. Yes. Could you come out and let us fight you 5-on-1? That's really what we would prefer. Exactly. But no, I love that. I mean, again, like, Maedhros wasn't wrong, but that sense of helplessness, not only the fact that obviously from Maedhros's perspective, Fingolfin is living the dream right now, right?
Yes.
Like that is Maedhros' dream. Like that is what Maedhros, like in Maedhros' heart of hearts, what he wants more than anything else is to be able to, go toe to toe with Morgoth. Yeah. Like that is, and Maedhros is never going to get to do that, right? And we know that will never happen. But again, it's another one of those, it just kind of adds to that sense of like, helplessness, but regret, but you know, not regret in the sense of I really wish I had done things differently, but regret that things have worked out this way. And you know, turns out we were both kind of right, and you know, but both also kind of wrong. And
we can definitely pay that off in season 7. With if Mithras. Any regrets that Mithras has will come out at that time.
Exactly.
But I think that the most important part of the whole fight scene is when it's over. Right after Fingolfin's been killed and Thorondor comes, and it's revealed that Thorondor is the one from whom we've been getting all these arrow shots with the GoPro on his back, right?
Right.
Or at least the other eagles, right, keeping an eye on what's going on. He comes down and he takes Fingolfin's body, and Morgoth is now just standing there by himself and has to slowly limp back.
Yes, the limp is super important.
And it's just like, and one thing I really wanted to convey in the script was this sense of how long that trip takes him. You know. And
that,
how
oh man, that could be such a powerful scene, right? Like, and I'm imagining like silence, no music, like silence, no sound but the thud, like the like step drag of Morgoth across, while we get like the shocked faces of Gothmog and the shocked face of Thurin-Gwethil and of Sauron, right? Everybody looking on as like, you know, as Morgoth goes limping back into Thangor-Adrim at the end.
So defeated. He's going to seem so defeated after this whole thing where everything has kind of gone his way. And it's just not going to feel like a win. No, that's great. I just love that. Oh, by the way, one small touch. Turgon, when we get Turgon, can we get ash falling in Gondolin or something? Like the fires, like some kind of evidence of the fires of, I don't know. I know ash fall like that kind of seems like a volcanic eruption sort of thing, but I'm just thinking of like when the entire, like, Dorthonian's right next to it, right? And it's all been on fire. So some kind of evidence, I mean, because I was just kind of I couldn't help but putting myself into Turgon's place and sitting there being like, what's he thinking? Like, gosh, it's been awful smoky, and now all of a sudden these, you know, yells from up north. I wonder what's happening. It's a very Cuivenin during the War of the Powers thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of it. So you know, I'm just imagining him listening to the sound of Morgoth's cries from the north, and like, you know, holding out his hand and you know, having ash falling through the you know, through the sky. You know, I don't know. So something, as you say, like Cuivenin. He is sheltered. His people are safe. But he knows that bad stuff has been happening, and now, you know, he's gonna learn later. Do we get Thorondor returning the body? Does that happen here?
Yes, it happens in the montage at the very end, where we establish where some of our key players wound up and whatnot.
Right. Okay, I couldn't remember if we saw that. I was pretty sure that we did. But anyway, so that we know we're cluing in. Do we see Maegwyn there? Probably Maegwyn is there with him.
He's there at the cairn, at Fingolfin's cairn.
Okay.
Looking at Idril rather than the cairn where he should be looking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In other words, being gross.
Yeah, right. Needless to say, right. Beginning his full-time career of creeping people out. Good. Excellent. Well, that was. Do we get a teaser image at the end? Other than, I mean, Minas Tirith and the older brother, but we've done it before, but did we?
I didn't have anything to really. I mean, there's a whole little montage at the end, which goes through a few things.
We get Barrett, right?
Barry's band is in that montage.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, that's the teaser.
That is calling forward to next season, but it's not like called out as like the after credit scene or anything like that. It's just one of the montage elements. So it's, unlike the last seasons, we don't have something really big and new that we're teasing, because we've set up Barahir's return to Dorthonion in the episode already.
Yeah. So yeah, Barrett here at the campsite, and Sauron holding the shattered remains of Ringo are the two things that are kind of calling forward to what's going on. While there are wolves in the background by Sauron eating Rochalor.
Right. Right.
Grim.
Yeah.
Right. Couldn't have spared a second eagle to save the body of the horse, I guess. Oh, well. Yeah. Priorities, I guess. Yeah, nice. Nice. Yes, the contemplative look up. Oh man, season 6 is going to be such an important Sauron season. Like this is it's like one of the turning points of Sauron's career. Well, two of the turning points of Sauron's career will both be happening in season 6. So awesome. Well, we it's really, I can't even tell you how tempting to talk more about this, but I'm not, because we're going to talk about season 6 later. This is a spectacular ending to season 5. So season 6 is primarily going to be the Beren and Luthien season. It's the shape of the Beren and Luthien story that's going to dominate season 6. There's obviously a lot to follow up on from what we've been doing. One of the things that we know is going to be different with season 6 from the Silmarillion account of the Beren and Luthien story is that the Beren and Luthien story kind of like forgets the rest of Beleriand while it's happening. I mean, it really just focuses on that story alone. And we're clearly not going to be able to do that. We're going to need to be, keeping it in the context of everything else that's happening. So that's going to be one really interesting, while nevertheless, obviously keeping it the central story of the whole season. So that's going to be really interesting to think about. But anyway, we are going to take a short break. We are going to resume session 1 of season 6 will be on December 2nd. We're going to stay at the same time. So Thursday, December 2nd will be our very first session as we will begin to indulge what we've been waiting for years now, and that is the planning and discussion of the major themes and ideas of season 6, and beginning to plan out the shape of it and talking about what we need to do and how we're going to do that. So that is going to be a great deal of fun. So thanks everybody. Thanks for everything you've done. My goodness, looking back at season 5, when was our first episode of season 5? The very beginning of the pandemic, right? Wasn't it?
It was March of 2020. Yeah. Yeah.
March of 2020 is when we began season 5. So it has, it's been a long time.
So now the pandemic will end.
Except because, it was just waiting for the end of season 5. Yeah.
Only hope.
Exactly. Yeah. So
saving the world one episode at a time.
That's it. Right. Or I get, let's hope it doesn't turn out that we just prolong things by making season 5 so long. So anyway, that's a two-edged sword right there, Nick. But anyway, yeah. So looking forward to jumping into season 6 and all the fun that we've been deferring now for a long time. So look forward to everybody joining us on December 2nd for the next exciting chapter of our project. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.